said, if I only touch him. She didn't even think about him actually laying his hand on her. She just wanted to touch him. And she knew she would be whole. And so what happened? Her blood dries up. She is healed because she met the great doctor. Now, I go to several different types of doctor, but I'll tell you what, there's one greater than the doctors that I go to, and that's Dr. Jesus. Dr. Jesus moved on the scene, and he healed her because she had already gone to a lot of different doctors. She spent all the money she had, and she was no better. But she heard that Jesus was coming through, and she knew if she pushed her way through, if she could just touch, one of the Gospels says, just touch the hem of his garment, she knows that she would be made ever with whole. So she was persistent. She pushed through the crowd. She touched the hem of his garment, and she was made ever with whole. So therefore, we need to be persistent. When we are praying for something, we're seeking something from the Lord, we need to be persistent in our prayers. We need to be persistent in our faith. Because, my friends, Jesus will meet your need. It may not be the time when you think it should be, but God is always on time. The Word says he will never leave us nor forsake us. So when God meets the need on prayer, let me tell you what, it's right at the right time and for the right thing. All right, let's go on with that story. Mark chapter 5, back to Mark chapter 5, verse 30 to 34. And Jesus immediately, knowing in himself that virtue had gone out of him, turned him about in the press and said, who touched my clothes? Now, think about this now. She didn't say, Jesus, I need you, I need prayer. But he could feel that a healing went forth out of him, and he turned around and said, who touched my clothes? And the disciples in verse 31 said unto him, thou seest the multitude thronging thee, and saying, who touched me? And that was a question mark. Of all the people that was around Jesus, they were saying, wait, Jesus, all these people are around us. How do you know somebody touched you? And he looked round about. In verse 32, it says he looked round about to see her that had done this thing. But the woman, fearing and trembling, in verse 33, she was fearing and trembling, knowing what was done in her. She knew from that point that she touched his garment, she was whole. So she was fearing and trembling, knowing what was done in her, came and fell down before him and told him all the truth. And in verse 34, and he said unto her, daughter, thy faith has made you whole. Go in peace, be whole of thy plague. And in a lot of the Gospels, Jesus continues to say, thy faith has made thee whole. Thy faith, thy faith, thy faith. So faith is one of the most important things to have when you are praying about something or praying about doing something. You need to have faith that Christ will answer that prayer when he sees Just like that, instantaneous. Other times, it's a graduated process. But he said, after she fearing and trembling and fell down at his feet. So now you think about that. God blesses and answers the prayers even of the humble. And that's how we need to come to God. We need to humble ourselves before God. We need to humble Him. We need to humble ourselves before Him in prayer, and God will meet the needs. And if you notice, thy faith, once again, thy faith, it wasn't Jesus' faith, it was the woman's faith. So that tells us that we need to have a persistent faith in order to have our needs met. You just can't pray once and expect Jesus to be Santa Claus and deliver the answer when and where you need it. Jesus is not Santa Claus. But that's why a lot of people pertain him to be. They don't even hardly open their Bible until they need something, and then oh Jesus, we need this. We're praying, God. You know, Jesus isn't Santa Claus. He wants our worship. He wants our praise. He wants to see our faith. You know, in Revelation, it tells that we were created to praise and worship God. He just doesn't want us to. He doesn't want to be number 2 or 3 down the pole. He wants to be the top of your life. He wants to be number 1 in your life. He wants you to be persistent in faith. All right, Hebrews chapter 4, verses 15 and 16. I always like verse 16, but we'll read verse 15 too. For we have not a high priest which cannot be touched with the feelings of our infirmities, but as in all points tempted like we are, yet without sin. Well, that's a lot right there. There's a couple of good sermons right there. For we have not a high priest which cannot be touched with the feelings of our infirmities, but was in all points tempted like as we are, yet without sin. Verse 16 says, let us therefore come boldly unto the throne of grace, that we may obtain mercy and find grace to help in time of need. Now, come boldly. What does that mean? To come boldly to the throne of grace. Well, that doesn't mean to come to the throne of grace with your chin rubbing the floor. It says, come boldly to the throne of grace. Means lift your head up. You lift your head up. No matter, it's hard sometimes to be positive. But the word says, come boldly to the throne of grace, that we may obtain mercy and find grace to help in time of need. But now let's jump back real quick to verse 15. He is touched. Jesus is touched with our feelings. He sees every tear, every heartache, and every sorrow. Now, can you imagine? Now, we're talking a pretty big world here. And the world's not that big, but we're talking about billions of people around the world. He sees each tear. He knows every heartache. And he knows every sorrow. Boy. And there were times that I would have problems just pastoring a church with 50, 60 people, knowing some of their secrets and heartaches and sorrows and stuff like that. Jesus has the responsibility of everybody in the world. And we are overcomers in all points, tempted like we, yet without sin. He gives us power, enabling us to overcome these things that come against us. But once again, it all goes back to persistent faith. It all goes back to the little lady with the issue of blood that pressed through the crowd. She met Dr. Jesus, and Jesus healed her. And all she did was touch the hem of his garment. And he knew that virtue had flown out of his body. And she was afraid. But Jesus said, thy faith had made thee whole. Thy faith. Thy faith. And that's what he's wanting us today to do and to have, is the persistent faith to go on every day. There may be times, I'll tell you what, there's times I don't feel like getting out of bed. But I do. And it's pretty tough sometimes because my leg hurts and the socket's not fitting right, but I still, they tell me now yesterday to put this thing in the socket. I need to wear it every day from morning to time I go to bed. I said, boy, you're asking a lot right there. But you think about it. We go back to being persistent. Being persistent. All the way back to verse 21 in Mark chapter 5. My daughter lieth at the point of death. How many times have we prayed to Jesus for a relative that's been laid up in the hospital or that is sick in bed? How many times have we prayed for a loved one or a friend that is in bed of sickness? And you pray that Jesus touches them. Once again, Jesus Christ came to meet the needs of the people. To obtain mercy and find grace to help in time of need. Boldness. When I give an altar call at church, people come down with their heads pointed down. I don't know how they can talk. I can't talk with my head pointed down very well. But anyways, I get my hand underneath their chin and kind of, boost their chin